Hello and welcome to the EchoChamber podcast. My name is Tony Groves and today we're talking about some of our own ugly truths. And speaking of ugly truths, just ugly.
Oh, that was a low blow, Tony. Low blow.
I should have said ugly liar. But listen, Martin, how are you doing, buddy?
It's not a low blow. From a banker to call it a liar. I mean, does it get any worse than that?
But much more importantly, we're delighted to be joined in the Tortoise Shack by activist. We're going to say blow in, Martin, because we're going to be completely politically incorrect about all of this, right? blow in and troublemaker. Ilaina Kairulzaman.
You couldn't even pronounce my first name right.
Ilaina.
Ilaina, yeah.
Ilaina Coke was what she was saying, but I'm not saying that on air, am I? No, honestly,
I apologise, Ilaina.
I'd
have got it right.
We're off to a terrible start here. No, Ilaina,
this is discrimination.
Yeah, and I thought actually that is where we're going to come straight in. It is about discrimination because myself and Martin were talking off air for the last while about one of the things that bothered me greatly around some of the. Aren't we wonderful, and patting ourselves on the back around marriage equality, around the repeal movement, and how quickly we forget the 27th Amendment and what we did in Ireland, how we chose to say that basically we didn't... We redefined what it meant to be Irish, and where in so far as, and by doing that we've restricted the ability of people who may have been born here to I want to say non-Irish parents, but and yet we have this country where we boast about how global we are, how we're an open economy is one of the biggest phrases we hear all the time. And I always think if you're going to have, and we talk about freedom of movement of goods is what we talk about, and yet we restrict freedom of movement of talent and people and actually humanity in large parts. So your job requires you to travel a lot.
Yep.
So you see this firsthand. Yep.
I mean, I think any migrant or non-national, as they would like to say, passport control is horrendous to go through, and it's always in Dublin airport that you get hit, because I think when you travel to an EU country it's open, you don't go through passport control there, but you have to go through it when you come back. And it's not just the queues. Sometimes the queues are fine, but it's just the actual passport control people, they're never nice to you. Like, you get maybe one or two nice people, but other than that, they're just really suspicious. They're like, why are you travelling to London all the time? And I'm like, oh, it's my job. And then they still ask you questions. They ask you, they have to ask all this standard questions like where you work, where you live and everything, but they're never friendly. And, you feel like you're not wanted there, like they don't want to deal with you there, and it's just it's a horrendous thing, and you don't want to go through it. And unfortunately, because I travel so much for work, I have to go through it. And it's just you don't feel like you're a part of the country, and that's the only time really that I feel like I'm not part of Ireland. When I go through passport control and when I have to go through my GNIB visa renewals, that's the other part. Yeah.
And the GNIB is a nightmare to go through.
Oh, God, yeah. And, now it's kind of like slightly better because they have the online appointment system. But even then, it's nearly impossible to get an appointment when you want one. Because it's just everyone's trying to get an appointment. And I don't know if you saw this article recently where there's people booking them and selling them for like €25.
What?
Yeah, it's insane. And then...
Oh, that's entrepreneurism. That is Fine Gael style. That is really brilliant stuff.
But that's not even new. I mean, before they had the online appointment system, you had to queue up to get a ticket, and people used to have to go at 3:00 in the morning. And there used to be people who would, have services where they offer to stand in line for you for money and stuff like that. But, it used to be like we were treated like cattle, basically. You had to queue up 3:00 in the morning to get a ticket, and if you were too late, then you don't get a ticket and you come back the next day and try it again. So that's changed, and I guess I was lucky because I never had to go through that, because Trinity students have like a certain allocated number of tickets, so privilege in that sense. But still, even now with the online appointment system, it's just horrendous. You have to check in every single day to try and get your appointment, and then you get there and you're still queuing for hours. You still have to wait for hours, and then you get there and the GNIB people are just awful.
And this is, like, to put that in context, I think the actual percentage of population that need to apply for this process, about 3.7% of Irish people that we're putting through this rigmarole, and actually you didn't say it, so I'm going to say it. People who we kind of, the system has deemed are less than, you know, and that's how it, you know, let's tell the truth. If you showed up, you can buy golden passports around the world now for, you know, standard entry is about £1 million gets you in the door, but because you know, because you've travelled in from Malaysia, they're turning around and they're saying, "Why are you here? What is the purpose of it?" Now, I want to be very careful here. The people who are on passport control, they have a job to do. Yeah. Not necessarily. Okay, they could be nicer. We can talk about about manners. But at the same time, the system itself is where I think the real fall down is. Especially as I keep going back to it, in a world that we keep saying we're an open economy. Well, the biggest tragedy in a globalized world is the people who are trapped because of their place of birth. And in any other field, you wouldn't be able to discriminate against people because of that. You know, you just can't. Yeah.
And I don't know, I think the passport control is something I have to go through more often than GNIB, so I probably complain about that a lot more. And, you know, I just personally hate borders. I think the next thing to dismantle after the patriarchy is borders. But the GNIB is probably the biggest thing for me. That's the biggest thing for me where I feel like I really just am less than.
Yeah.
Because not just the way they treat you, like you get there and nobody even makes eye contact with you. They just ask for your documents and that's it. And if they're not happy with it, they can very much just say no. And that's it's happened twice now that I had to fight for it and prove, you know, that I work where I worked because they didn't believe my letter was real, for example.
Really?
Yeah. And, you know, there's been times when I literally had to, you know, tell them, you can call my boss or you can call the university. They'll prove everything to you. I don't know why you don't believe it. And, you know, it's just, I don't know if it's a case of like unconscious bias, or I don't want to say people are racist, obviously, but, you know, it's frustrating.
Yeah, well, I suppose I'm gonna be unnecessarily contrarian, but if I was told that someone moved from on purpose from Kuala Lumpur to Carlow, I'd be suspicious too.
Oh yeah, you have to tell us this story.
Okay.
You moved to Carlow. Now, you mentioned this downstairs, and I was saying, for a dub to move to Carlow is like unbelievable culture shock. But for you, it must have been out of this world.
Yeah, it was pretty great. Basically, the college I was in Malaysia had like a twinning program with Carlow out of all the places. And I was very much at a stage where I just wanted to leave Malaysia and go see somewhere else. And so I applied to Carlow IT. I applied to a bunch of other universities in the UK and the US, but Carlow was the first to get back to me. And me and my whole, I just want to get out of here kind of thing. I said, okay, yeah, let's just do it. Screw it, let's just do it. Yeah. Like, this will be an adventure. Why not? I don't know where Carlow is, but let's do it.
It must be close to Dublin, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. I was like, oh, it's only an hour away from Dublin. That's what it says on the maps. It's fine.
There's a hotel that's beyond, it's closer to Belfast, I think, but it's called the City North Hotel on the M1. And I'd say all these people who are coming into Dublin go, we'll book the City North Hotel. That's nice and close.
That's basically what I thought in my head. Was like, it's really close to Dublin. It's grand.
Yeah.
So we paid the fees, half of the fees, a non-refundable deposit, and because non-EU fees are so much higher, we paid like 4.5k or something.
Yeah.
So non-refundable, and then like 2 days after that, all the other university offers came in.
Oh God.
But I couldn't say yes to any of them because I already paid so much money. So we were like, all right, you know what, that's fine. I'll go to Carlow. And coincidentally, my uncle is Irish. So my aunt married an Irish man from Portlaoise.
Right.
So he used to go out in Carlow a lot. He's like, oh yeah, Carlow's great. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is fine. It's totally fine. And then I got to Carlow. And I was like, whoa. It's like...
There was no skyline.
No, it was just like... I mean, I love Carlow. Like, all the Carlovians listening to this, I'm not shitting on Carlow at all. But, like, I love Carlow, but it's such a small town. And it's a proper student town. Like, you have 2 nightclubs, 5 pubs, and 7 chippers or something like that, you know? So it was like a huge... I mean, coming from Kuala Lumpur to, like, a small student town, I was just like, whoa, this is not what I expected.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a huge culture shock. There's a Foundry though.
Yeah, well, look,
the biggest nightclub in Europe.
Nobody can keep a straight face. This is we're not going to be asked to be sponsored by Carlow anytime soon, Martin. I don't think
I'm welcome back now.
How long did you stay in Carlow?
9 months. It was only supposed to be 9 months that I was meant to be in Ireland, but now it's been 4 years. So it's one of those things.
Yeah, and for 4 years though, but 4 years then means what in terms of actually? I'm going to say use the word naturalizing.
So I think it's 5 years that you have to be here in order to get your permanent resident or citizenship, but it doesn't count your time as a student or as a graduate visa or on your graduate visa. So I've only been on a student visa or graduate visa. So the 4 years I've spent here doesn't go towards naturalization at all. So
it's not great, is it?
No, it's really frustrating, and it's really like, if I get a work permit, that's when it starts, basically. So it's 5 years from then. So if I get a work permit, let's say in December or next year, that's when it starts.
And you do work with MERJ, isn't it?
Yes, I do. So MERJ is the Migrants and Ethnic Minorities for Reproductive Justice. So it's a great group of migrants and people from ethnic minorities, and we really just try to fight certain things, fight for reproductive justice, just like the name says. So it's trying to get more migrant visibility, trying to get more ethnic minority visibility when it comes to things about reproductive healthcare. So it's a really, really great group of people. And one thing that really kind of, I've heard this statistic like a million times and it still shocks me, but like the population of Ireland is made up of like 13% of migrants. But 40% of maternal deaths in Ireland are of migrants.
That's a shocking stat. That's a shocking statistic.
That's huge, isn't it?
Yes.
And you're kind of wondering why, like, how is that possible?
Well, you would think that if those are the figures, and I'm not for a second saying those aren't the figures, that minority groups would be better represented or would need better representation, but you've actually seen the opposite.
Yeah, no, a bunch of, like, talking about the repeal movement, for example, when you look at the national campaign and everything, there was no migrant representation whatsoever. And, even, I feel like we have to fight to platform migrant voices, because it almost feels like, I mean, I hate saying this, but it does feel like we're like collateral damage. Like, it doesn't really matter because we're not really Irish,
Well, it does matter when it's 40% of the
exactly.
Of course it matters.
Yeah. And you look at the cases, the recent cases, and, they always do an inquisition and everything, and always comes back and it's like, oh, it's a medical misadventure, or it's just negligence, and it just gets forgotten. And you're just wondering, okay, if this was a middle-class white woman, it wouldn't be forgotten. It wouldn't be just thrown to the side like that,
Yeah, no, that's a very fair point. That is a very fair point.
Look, it's about, you've said privilege, but there is obviously a scale, and it's not just in reproductive justice, as you put it. It's actually, the representation is actually obviously across the board, because we tend to be a very, we're now coming up at 18% of the population is made up of people who weren't born here originally. And yet, if you try to see that in different aspects or campaigns or public life, you don't see that, okay? Now, we do have, do you ever hear the interesting study on moral licensing about how, you know, you do something good so you can do something bad? It's the guy, they were talked about it in behavioural economics about the people who voted for Obama and then went, I voted for Obama, but I'm sick of these Mexicans.
Yeah.
You know, and we kind of have given ourselves too many pats on the back in this country for some of our liberal choices without actually, you know, really tackling what is our own discriminations, I suppose.
Yeah. And like, I tweeted about, sorry, excuse me. I tweeted about, thank you. I tweeted about the statistic today, the 40% of maternal deaths, and someone asked, why do you think that is? And, you know, it was, to me anyway, it's a combination of misogyny, racism, maybe even language barriers, but also, I think, unconscious bias. And someone actually replied saying, you know, do you really think that healthcare workers are discriminating against migrants? And well, yeah. I mean, why else would there be 40% of maternal deaths?
Well, the Scally report said that there was misogyny in the cases in cervical check. Why wouldn't there be in the case of we shouldn't, that wouldn't change just because, you know, so let's call a spade here.
But people are more, I think, open to accepting misogyny than they are with racism. I don't know why. I mean, I've said before that Ireland is racist or can be racist, and people have just come back to me being really offended, being like, oh, how dare you say that? You know, I've never experienced racism. I'm like, of course you've never experienced it. You're a white Irish woman or you're a white Irish man. You're never going to experience it. And, you know, people just get really defensive over that. And I understand it. You don't want to feel like your country is racist, or, you know, if you yourself aren't racist, you don't want to associate yourself with racist. But not acknowledging it is a huge problem.
Well, I don't know about saying I'm not a racist, because I think there's racism like everything else. There's levels to some of it is just plain ignorance, some of it is misunderstandings, and then there's actually the more dangerous and vile parts of it. So some people who are offended may just be offended on the basis that, you know, their own, maybe we call them unconscious biases or their own beliefs. You know, would you term that as someone who's a racist? Actually, you have to see it in context of through the eyes of the person who's been offended, rather than the person who's actually going, oh God, that wasn't what I meant. So, you know, some of that is cultural, but we all have our own issues, and we're all on a journey, Martin.
Well, you can see, and it's not unfair to say that there's institutional racism and it's structured racism. We see it in the courts. We see it with minority groups within the courts, our own minority groups within the courts. There is a structural racism built in there, and a structural bias built in.
Yeah. Like, I feel like you don't even have to look at how people react towards people of colour or anything like that, but, like, look at the way Irish people treat the traveller community, for example. Exactly. You know? So it's just, I just don't understand when people can't just acknowledge that this happens and try to do better, because I think that's the first step too. But
there's always we'll say with travellers, there's always a rationalisation to follow the reason why. Yeah. And it is just a rationalisation. It's not the truth. It's how do we make ourselves feel better about what we do.
Yeah. It's the same thing with people of colour as well. That's the same thing they do.
Same thing with direct provision.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, direct provision is a whole other... It's really frustrating to see that there's not a lot of people talking about direct provision, and even if it is, it's either, you know, migrant groups or people who are allies of migrants. And it's really frustrating because obviously with repeal, the amount of migrants who went out to campaign, even though they couldn't vote, you know, I spent like hours of my, like, any spare time I spent campaigning. I was out on the streets, I was you know, packing up repeal jumpers and stuff like that, put my heart and soul into the campaign, even though I couldn't vote. And then now with direct provision, suddenly, like, all these people I would have thought would have had our backs are just completely silent.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating because, you know...
I went to before the last election, there were focus groups and there were groups that you could attend where they were talking about different issues. And I went to one where it was about direct provision and people from direct provision spoke. And I think it's come back a fair few years. Yeah. And the issues they raised are still the issues that exist today. Yeah. And as we've seen with politicians who had power in this country to do something about it, they talk the talk. But when it comes to it, they're not going to change the status quo. They're not. And even the ones that are lauded as great liberals, they're not doing bloody anything about direct provision. Nothing.
They are doing something about direct provision. They've created a profitable.
It seems to be. You're dead right about that, Tony, and that stretches beyond direct provision. It seems they have taken the model for direct provision and now extended that same model into homelessness and called it family hubs, which again is disproportionately affecting migrant communities.
And I don't want to jump in, but it's just, if you look at that, like some of the examples really in direct provision where you have companies like Aramark who are running these centres, and and again it comes back down to othering and making people less than, therefore, and as you put it, Martin, rationalising it away, because sure, they came here and we're trying to resolve their whether they're eligible for asylum status or whatever. But hang on, let me just finish, because it's really important we finish this point. We stood up and we said we're going to do all of this about, the people in the Mediterranean, the people fleeing North Africa, the people fleeing Syria, and we agreed to take 5,000 migrants. That was 3 years ago. Yeah. And I think so far we've successfully taken 2,100. We were supposed to do 5,000 in year one. Okay, so we're great. We're a great country for saying we're a great country. Yeah. That's what we're great at doing. It's the follow through that we're really shit at. Yeah. And the proof is in the pudding, guys. And what you're doing now is, we saw Gary Gannon and Dublin City Council making the right decision not to let the last Magdalen laundry go into to become a hotel. But on the flip side, we're going to have convert a direct provision centre in 50 years' time into a museum to commemorate the horrors of what we've done there.
I agree, Tony, and a family hub. Yeah. That's good, and probably a bloody hotel room where some family has lived for 20 years while everybody sits around on their hands. Yeah. We're probably going to have to do all of this.
Yeah. And even with direct provision, there's people who still say, well, it's still better than where they came from. It's like they have a roof over their head, they're given food, and I'm like, Would you be able to live on €21 a week? Would you and the conditions that they live in is horrendous. And
as Grace Dyes pointed out to us in terms of, say, just in prison. So it was €22,000 for a bed in a prison for a year for now. Let's not. I am making a false equivalence between prison and direct provision, but there are a little bit less, but nonetheless. Those people who are stuck in limbo in these situations, in a country that people say, well, we want people contributing. Yeah. Let them contribute. Yeah. And we saw where we said, well, we made it where you can work now, but you actually made it that you had to be earning a job over 35,000 to actually start earning. Like, who's going to give this person the job for 35,000? So we patted ourselves on the back that day for saying we've changed the law where they can now work, but then we put the work out of reach of 80% of the people.
Yeah, but there's also, a lot of direct provision centres are in rural areas. So a lot of them, there's no public transportation for them to go find work. They're still, the people in direct provision, they're not allowed to leave their bed for 3 days or else the bed gets given away to someone else. So, there's all these, you're in rural Ireland, you're trying to find a job where, chances are there's no jobs where you're living. There's no way for you to access those jobs. So in the end, what are you really doing for them? Seriously, fine, they can work now, but
you're making the conditions so shitty that you just hope they'll leave.
Yeah.
Let's tell the truth. It's the same mentality where if I want someone to go hungry because they have to pay VHI, the best way to do that is actually make the health service shit. And the same way to do that with certain aspects is, it's neoliberalism. I'm sorry, but that's what it is.
The best driver a dysfunctional housing market where people are being charged $2,000 a month for average rent is to actually see homeless people on the streets. Yeah. That's the best driver for that market. That is the best driver. Yeah. And it's the same with direct provision. When you see people who can't get out of direct provision because of the cost of living on the other side of that. Yeah. And it is a fence. Tony said it's a false equivalence to say it's like a prison. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think it is like a prison.
Yeah, and people in direct provision have said it. That it does feel like you're in prison.
Yeah.
Because there's no freedom of travel, really. If you're, if you're stuck to that whole 3 days, you have to return within 3 days. So where could you actually go, kind of thing? And you don't have any, autonomy over yourself, It's just...
Well, there's a huge hypocrisy in us and again, we have the highest number of immigrants, is it in the EU or Irish born?
Across the diaspora,
Yeah. So, we export an awful lot of people, yet we don't show any courtesy on this end for people coming in.
Yeah.
And we don't.
Yeah. And I've had, people say to me, your type of immigrant is fine because you contribute, you work, you assimilate it into the culture, so you're all right. And it just really... it makes me really sad because I'm like, the only type of people that you would accept are people who
are funny on Twitter. No, we're right. We're onto something now. Maybe the GNIB could be man. If we look at the Twitter account and you're funny, we can make it better for you. I think that's what we'll do. Someone get Charlie Flanagan on the phone. But this is where. But it is like I can see why you're offended by it, but I'm trying to rationalize it in my own head because very much like. I also know that it's very easy to other people. Like the othering that goes on is it's very simple to fall into the tropes because we have got we can turn around and say things about we have a great history of the land of 1,000 welcomes, Céad Míle Fáilte, we've all of these sort of things, but the hard reality of it is right now in direct provision centres there are people living in effective open concentration camps. You really are. You're monitoring people's. This is your quality of life, and it can only come up to this standard here. It can't actually be free. And same with yourself. Your freedom of movement is inhibited. We have to get a grip of this because if we want to talk about Ireland taking its place as a open economy and in a global world, we have to extend that. I think we have to extend that to people as well. But I'm an open borders loon, so
it's very much the same. Like I said, I want to dismantle borders. I'll probably get thrown out now of the country for saying that.
Well, passports were only invented. They're only 100 years old now. They were only created just because of around World War I to restrict movement because they wanted to be able to see who was on what side.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually anything to do with border security.
Yeah.
So we used to have more freedom of movement.
Yeah. And it's just mental to me as well that, there's people there who can just decide whether or not you're kind of worthy just based on your passport. Because obviously some passports are stronger than others. Or some passports, I don't know how to explain this, but the Malaysian passport is considered kind of an okay passport because you're from, Southeast Asia and everything.
Yeah.
So we're kind of okay.
But would you still not get to say, is that a majority Muslim country?
Oh yeah, I get that shit so much as well.
Yeah.
And then people ask, why aren't you wearing the hijab and stuff like that, or why aren't you more Muslim?
If you have one, will you give it to Martin? His head gets cold.
I do have hijabs. I'll bring one for you. But no, I get those questions as well, and they ask me if the reason why I left Malaysia is because it's so conservative and stuff like that. That's a whole other conversation for another day, because I could go for hours about Malaysia. But yeah,
there are issues.
Yeah, there. Yeah, but it's. That's another thing as well when people say, but your kind of Muslim is alright, and I'm just how can you say that?
Yeah, but like, well, if we can call water protesters the equivalent of ISIS, it's we can easily make a comment like that and we can make that comment in the Dáil, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, that was.
Wait, what was this?
During the water protests, one of a deputy for Fine Gael said that there was that some of the water protesters were behaving like ISIS.
It was an ISIS situation. That's what it was.
Oh my God.
So if you can make a comment like that, you can see how easy it is to turn around and go, well, you're the right kind of Muslim.
Yeah.
Extremist language comes in forms, and that type of nonsense that they go on with, where they demonize it's the loony left, the radical left, that take back the streets is somehow criminal. It's not. Yeah. It's a civil matter.
Yeah.
That they can say these things quite openly and nobody corrects them.
Yeah.
We had it during the week where a junior minister and a very junior minister said that it was criminal. That Take Back the Streets was acting in a criminal way, and I'm like,
we had another member of the Fine Gael party saying that because they were well organised, that they were militaristic.
Oh my God!
Yeah. So to actually be organised meant that you were kind of a guerrilla warfare.
This is a political party that is based upon cells that they call commons that all operate independently of each other. So they operate like a terrorist organisation. That's the way they operate, and they turn around to other people and gone, oh no, you can't get organised. If you're organised, you're kind of like us.
The game recognising game.
Oh God.
I know, it's crazy stuff.
It is. It's completely insane. But like,
what conversations do you think need to happen? I know that's a big question.
That is a big question. First of all, allow our voices to be heard. Actually have the conversations with us first of all, when someone brings something, when you're being, when you're being called out on, don't immediately get defensive. Try to understand why. Have discussions. Actually ask people about their experiences, especially like what you're doing now, really. But yeah, I think the first thing is just to platform the voices. I think a lot of people, might be scared because it's still unfamiliar to them, and I completely understand that. But, just allow us to speak.
Well, I think you and I had a little quick conversation about focus groups. We won't even mention where it was.
Yeah.
But there was a focus group who looked at having minority voices. We'll say even up to the 13% of what they were doing. Yeah. And they decided not to. And that was because it doesn't play well with the wider Irish community, which shows that there is a very substantial level of inherent racism within the country. No,
I agree. And I think, I think everyone has this kind of like picture in their head when you say immigrant people, picture a certain type of person, or, and it's always kind of, it's the media partly as well, they feed into this whole image that we're all, trying to destroy the country.
Well, they use terms like wave or plague or these awful things that are just dehumanizing. Yeah,
and to people who don't have, migrant friends or immigrant friends, that's their only exposure, and that's what they'll think, and it's, to me, it's very much like just find someone to talk to and allow people to speak about their experiences. Stop trying to appeal to this middle Ireland that doesn't exist. Right. We've seen that it doesn't exist.
It's not a real thing.
It's not, and just stop being so scared about letting minority groups speak.
Yeah, well, I think that's the first thing is, absolutely give people, I hate saying give people a platform. No, just get out of their way. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because people need, empowerment comes from yourself, but at the same time, it's important that people are inclusive. So even just having a little conversation here today, I think is good. But also, I think, from when I say what also needs to happen is we need to have a serious look at ourselves as well, because we've let ourselves off the hook the last while because we've been so, aren't we, great around, and again, great victories in repeal. I celebrated repeal. I was I'm going to say the word privilege, to be sitting near or with Tara Flynn and Colin O'Gorman and Anna Cosgrave was there and Roisin Ingle was there. The moment the Michael D signed, it repealed the Eighth Amendment. So I was sitting there in the room, and that is a great moment. Absolutely, it's historic. Yeah. But we also, in our history, not so long ago, we decided to reclassify Irishness. Yeah. Things like that, and we're having are we having another referendum on a blasphemy? Yeah. In law in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, and that law is not that old. I even remember it being brought in, and it was crazy at the time. It was just crazy at the time. But there is also an element, Tony, that if you can concentrate on something like blasphemy laws, well, then you don't have to deal with wider issues that are out there, such as direct provision, such as what we do about immigration in this country.
A right to housing.
Look, and I think we can safely say that right to housing has united a lot of groups and is uniting a lot of groups. Take Back the City has involvement from a lot of minority groups as well. Yeah. So, I'm very much for people standing up and saying, no, enough's enough. Yeah. I find it hard to believe that a country with our history, with so many people starved off the land by unaccountable landlords, that any government has let it get back to this.
Yeah. It's really, really shocking. I mean, I when I came from Malaysia, everyone talks about the Western world being this utopia, everything's so great, everyone's listened to, everyone's protected and everything. And then to come to Ireland and see, even in just the 4 years that I've been here, how badly it has gotten. I mean, anyone who tries to even deny that there's a housing crisis is completely delusional. You walk down Grafton Street at night now, there's someone sleeping rough on every shop front. I cannot believe that there are people who are still denying this, and people who are against people standing up and saying enough is enough.
Well, you will find that those who are loudest about saying that people who want to have a house or a roof over their heads, somewhere secure, are looking for something for nothing, you will find that those voices are generally those that have two or more houses. Yeah. And nobody can live in two houses at one time. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Not since P. Flynn. But there, look. Just to bring it out to the wider, you're right. There is a huge, there is a part of, there is a delusional part out there that says this doesn't exist. I saw, Owen O'Malley had a piece in the Times yesterday where he said people think they have a right to live to a house wherever they want it. And I didn't see that in any of Take Back the City's campaign. No, hang on. It's important that this gets. This was in a national newspaper, and it's just false. The right to housing is a right to adequate housing. This isn't them saying I want a 4-bed semi.
No. But that said too, Tony, you and I are Dublin born, and there's millions of us here in Dublin that are Dublin born. What gives anybody the right to say that I don't have the right to live in Dublin simply because I can't afford to pay the exorbitant prices that landlords have put on this country? You can't gentrify the city. You can't. Molly Malone is not written about some landlord. It's written about a working class woman in Dublin. We don't sing songs about bloody landlords because they're something we put up with. And if we don't like what they're doing, we get rid of them. Historically, we always have done. Now we're being run by vultures, where previously we were run by kings. It's nonsense. Yeah. And anybody who says, I can't live in Dublin because I can't afford to live in Dublin, well, fuck you. Fuck you. It's not just about price. It's about roots. It's about where you belong. And if you say, fuck off down to Carlow because, you can't afford to live in Dublin. No, you fuck off down to Carlow. And leave Dublin to the people who were born here and who want to live here and who want to be productive members of society. Not the arseholes that are stocking up piles and piles of property and exploiting everybody. Fuck them.
You're right and you're wrong, because the reality of that is there's people who are stockpiling houses via different vehicles. So that you have vulture funds, you have short-term rentals. Like the statistic I put up yesterday was scary. 1,100 total properties for rental in Dublin in August, and in 2016, 1,022 Airbnbs in Dublin, and that's gone up above that. They reckon by about 27 to 33%. Mm-hmm. So we've now more Airbnbs available than we have properties to rent in the city, and in a city where I saw someone else came at me and said that there's 23,000 total Airbnbs in Ireland. And you have that in Ireland, and we have 10,000 homeless people, and they were defending Airbnb in that argument. It was a completely self-defeating argument. There are lots of solutions, Martin. We do need landlords. We're always going to need landlords, because not everybody is always going to be able to afford to buy their own home. But we need a mix. And right now what we have is people who can't even afford to pay the rent, let alone ever dream of buying a home. Just to bring it back, I'm after getting sidetracked now. but the cold hard reality is where we let other people down is by othering them.
Yeah.
I think, having these conversations is only a start. I think it would be great if we could look at as well, legislatively, of things, how we could make things better. And I think you through your work with MERJ need to also broaden those arguments, because that's where I think you need to start looking, because nothing gets changed until it's actually policy.
Oh yeah, no, completely. But it is, the whole problem with being a minority group is that you're tiny.
Yeah.
And, we need support from allies. We need people who are going to stand with us. And like I said, I was really involved in the repeal movement. I'm getting quite involved with Take Back the City now. And, so many other migrants like me are doing the same thing, where we're standing with the Irish people and everything. And I just wish that people would do the same for us. And,
well, that's the call to action, so.
Yeah.
That's the call to action.
Yeah. To stand with us, when it comes to migrant issues, stuff like direct provision and the 27th Amendment, we need you to stand with us and say that this isn't okay. And, especially, in repeals, Vita's name was used so much, and her picture was used so much, and she was almost this poster child for the movement. And then suddenly, after the referendum was won, it was the migrant community was just tossed aside again, and it's really frustrating. And you're just wondering, is it only when it benefits the whole that's when you care about us?
I think we have to understand that, yes, that there's absolute leverage that happens in all campaigns. That's what campaigning is. I don't think a lot of people do these things intentionally.
Oh no, I don't think it's intentional.
No, I'm not excusing other things. I'm just saying this is the nature of campaigning. But I do think you're right. The call to action is stand with, actually speak up, and then using that awful word again, platform those voices.
Yeah, just let us speak when we want to speak, and don't put up the barriers, because there's always barriers put up for us. And I just you might not think we appeal to Middle Ireland or whatever, but give yourselves a bit of credit as well. I think Irish people are a lot more open when they actually hear the experiences of people that they're not familiar with. Yeah.
I agree with you.
I love Ireland because of the people, mostly. And, everyone I've spoken to, they've been really open to listening to my experiences. They've been open to, criticism when it needs to be. So I'm really sure that if we were given space to exist and speak, people would be open to listening.
Well, thank you very much for coming on and letting us know. That was a great conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
No, listen, guys, what are we up to next Friday, Martin?
Oh, next Friday we're having this shindig in the Axis, 7:00. We're going to do a bit of a live pod, a bit of an awards ceremony, and the categories are up online, retweeted there a couple of times up online. There's some very interesting categories in it. Yeah. And we'll be giving out a few awards, and then we'll have a few drinks afterwards down in the...
Are we hitting the Diggers?
Diggers, I think, is where we've decided. 7 till about 9. there are some places available. Just contact me or Tony, and we'll book you in, and that basically free of charge, because we want to do this for people.
Yay!
Also, the week after, we are in the Sound House on Egan Quay.
That's right.
And we have. Speaking of tech bros, we have Paddy Cosgrave is our special guest, and actually our very special guest is Emeritus Professor from Trinity College, PJ Drudy. And if you don't know who PJ is, you should, because he's the economist who taught all of the celebrity economists that we're always told know all about everything. So it's a bit of a coup. And I tell you guys,
I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
There's going to be some electric conversation, shall we say, going on.
Yeah. Listen, folks, thanks for listening. Remember, share the news, share it out, because look, without you guys, we have no other way of getting the word around. Talk to you all soon. Take care. Bye bye.